Hi, my name is Luna. If you had met me 5 years ago, you would have seen a woman who seemed to have it all figured out. A steady job in downtown Milwaukee. A cozy apartment near Lake Michigan. A circle of friends who sent group texts every morning like clockwork. To most people, my life probably looked safe, stable, but beneath all of that structure, I was quietly crumbling. You see, I had spent years building a life around everyone else's expectations. My father, a Navy vet, believed in discipline and structure. My mother, sweet, soft-spoken, wanted me to have security. So I chose the responsible path. I worked in corporate insurance. I showed up on time. I smiled at meetings. And I silenced the voice inside me that kept whispering, "This isn't who you are." But the thing about ignoring your own truth is that eventually, it breaks through the cracks. For me, it started small, sleepless nights. Anxiety that wrapped around my ribs like wire. Then came the loss of appetite. The panic attacks in bathroom stalls. And then came the silence. The kind where you wake up and feel absolutely nothing. It was a Thursday when everything snapped. I remember because the sky was gray and the lake smelled like rain. I was walking to work when my phone rang. It was Dr. Michaels, my therapist. I had missed yet another appointment. I heard his voice on voicemail. Soft and concerned, Luna. I'm worried. Please call me back. I didn't call. I didn't go to work. I walked until my feet hurt. Past the rusted train tracks near 6th Street. Past old diners with neon signs that blinked like they were too tired to keep going. And finally, I sat on a park bench and cried, not the pretty kind of crying, but the kind that empties you, that unearths years of pretending. That night, I didn't go home. I found a motel near the edge of town. $29 a night. I paid in cash. The room smelled like mildew and cigarettes. And the ceiling had water stains shaped like islands. But for the first time in a long time, I felt honest. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was lost. I was scared. But I was me. And maybe, I thought, that was the first step. Because sometimes, you have to fall apart to see what's still standing. That was the night I disappeared from the world I built for everyone else. The night Luna, the real Luna, started to wake up. The first few days in that motel were a blur. I kept the curtains drawn and the lights off. I survived on vending machine snacks and lukewarm water from the tap. I barely moved. My phone buzzed non-stop calls from work. Texts from my sister. Voicemails from my landlord, but I couldn't bring myself to answer any of them. Each ring felt like a reminder of the life I had abandoned. And I wasn't ready to face it. There's a strange kind of silence that sets in when you cut yourself off from the world. It's not peaceful. It's loud in its own way. Your thoughts echo louder than anything around you. Guilt creeps in like smoke under the door. What am I doing? Where am I going? Did I just ruin my life? I told myself I needed space. But really, I was unraveling. Every hour that passed, I felt more like a ghost. I looked at my reflection in the motel mirror one night and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Pale, hollow-eyed, I whispered to her, "What happened to you?" On the 5th night, something inside me cracked. I had just finished a bag of stale pretzels when a commercial on the motel television came on, some overly cheerful ad for a beach vacation in Florida. Sunday. Laughter. Families building sandcastles. I stared at the screen like it was some alien world I could never return to. Then, without warning, I burst into tears. Not quiet sobs this time, but full-on heaving. My body folded in on itself like it couldn't carry the weight anymore. That night, I lay curled up in a ball on the motel mattress, feeling like a failure. I had no plan, no money left. My savings had nearly run dry. I hadn't talked to anyone in days. For the first time in my life, I didn't see a future ahead of me. I thought about walking out to the highway and just disappearing. But somewhere, between the sobs and the silence, I remembered something. A voice. It was my grandmother's. From years ago. I must have been 7, maybe 8. Crying in her kitchen because some girl at school had called me weird. Grandma had looked at me, wiped my tears, and said, "Being lost doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're still searching." That memory, so small, so random, was like a thread in the darkness. I grabbed hold of it. Maybe I was still searching. Maybe that meant I still had a chance. The next morning, I did something different. I opened the curtains. Sunlight spilled across the room, lighting up the dust in the air. It wasn't much, but it was something. I got dressed and walked to the gas station across the street for coffee. The cashier didn't smile. No one noticed me. But it was the first time in a week I had stepped outside without hiding. I sat on the curb with that coffee in my hand, staring at the cracked pavement and thinking, okay, I'm not okay, but I'm here. And maybe that's enough for today. Because rock bottom isn't always the end. Sometimes, it's the first honest ground you've stood on in years. It started with a notebook. One afternoon, as I sat alone in the motel lobby sipping cheap coffee, I noticed a teenage girl scribbling furiously in a worn-out journal. She looked about 16, earbuds in, completely lost in her world. I couldn't help but smile. She reminded me of myself before the world told me to grow up and play it safe. That night, I walked to the dollar store and bought a lined notebook and a blue pen. Back in my room, I stared at the blank page for hours before writing a single sentence. I don't know who I am anymore, but I want to find out. From that point on, I wrote every day. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I wrote about the girl I used to be. The woman I pretended to be. And the version of me I might still become. I didn't care about grammar or punctuation. I just poured. Everything. Regret. Anger. Dreams I had buried so deep. I forgot they existed. And as the pages filled, something unexpected happened. I started hearing my own voice again. Around the same time, I began walking through Milwaukee's older neighborhoods. Not to go anywhere. Just to move. I found a little park tucked behind an old Lutheran church. The benches were cracked. The fountain didn't work, but it was quiet. I started bringing my notebook there. Sometimes I just sit and listen birds. Wind. The distant rumble of trucks on the freeway. For the first time in ages, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like space. Space to breathe. One afternoon, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Clara, who ran a local thrift shop near the park. She was in her 60s, wore oversized glasses, and called everyone darlin'. I told her I was between jobs. She asked if I could help organize the back room a few mornings a week. It wasn't much minimum wage and some old coffee, but it gave me something to wake up for. And in that messy little thrift shop, surrounded by secondhand clothes and forgotten books, I started remembering what purpose felt like. Clara became like a mentor. She'd talk to me while pricing items, telling me about her divorce, her cancer scare, her son who hadn't called in 5 years. Everyone's got a story. Darlin', she'd say, it's what you do next that counts. That line stuck with me. Because for so long, I thought my story ended when I walked away from my old life. I thought quitting my job, losing my apartment, vanishing from my friends meant I had failed. But maybe it didn't. Maybe it meant I was finally writing a new chapter, not the one others planned for me, but the one I needed to live. One day, Clara asked me what I really wanted to do. I laughed. I have no idea. She didn't flinch. That's the best place to start. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote a different sentence. Maybe I'm not lost. Maybe I'm just beginning. And suddenly, the fear didn't feel so loud. Because I wasn't running anymore. I was rebuilding from nothing. Yes, but also from truth. And truth, I was learning, is a pretty solid foundation. A few weeks later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I applied for a writing class. It was at the community center downtown. Nothing fancy. Tuesday and Thursday evenings. A dozen people in a stuffy room with flickering lights and mismatched chairs. But the first time I walked in, clutching my notebook like a lifeline, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. The instructor, a woman named Lee with wild curls and a tattoo of a quill on her wrist, asked us on the first day to write about a place that changed you. My hand trembled as I put pen to paper. I wrote about the motel room, the vending machine dinners, the cracked bench in the park, the morning I opened the curtain and let the sun in. I didn't hold anything back. When I finished reading it aloud, the room was silent. Then Lee looked at me and said, "That felt real. Like you weren't trying to impress us. You just told the truth." That one sentence cracked something wide open inside me. For years, I had lived trying to meet other people's expectations, my boss, my ex, even my own imagined standard of success. But now, for the first time, I was just me. No masks. Not performance. Just raw. Messy. Beautiful truth. I kept writing. Every day. Every night. I filled notebooks. Wrote poems. Essays. Short stories that bled into memoir. The words poured out like they'd been waiting years to breathe. Clara noticed the change in me too. "You've got fire in your eyes again," she said one morning as I reorganized a stack of old paperbacks. "You look alive." And I wasn't making much money. I still shared a room above the thrift shop. I walked instead of drove. But none of it felt like lack anymore. It felt like clarity. Like simplicity. Like I was no longer dragging a version of myself I didn't believe in. And then one day, Lee pulled me aside after class. "There's a storytelling showcase next month," she said. "Local writers reading their work live? I think you should do it." My heart nearly stopped. Read my story. Out loud. In front of strangers. Everything in me wanted to say no. To shrink back into the safety of quiet pages and early morning park benches. But then I remembered Clara's words. "It's what you do next that counts." So I said yes. For the next 3 weeks. I practiced every night. I read to the walls. To the mirror. To the stars outside my window. My voice shook. My knees buckled. But the words held me up. The night of the showcase, I stood on a tiny stage in a coffee shop packed with strangers. My palms were sweating. My throat was dry. But I opened my notebook and read. I told them about the motel room, the pretzels, the silence. I told them about the park, the thrift shop, and the sentence that saved me. Maybe I'm not lost. Maybe I'm just beginning. When I finished, there was a pause. And then, applause. But it wasn't the clapping that stayed with me. It was the woman who came up to me afterward, eyes glistening, and said, "Thank you. I've been where you were, and I didn't know how to say it. But you just did." That was the moment I realized This wasn't just about me anymore. My story had become something more. A mirror. A map. A light. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. The night after the showcase, I sat on my bed, still in my jeans, notebook open in my lap, hands shaking not from fear this time, but from something else, something like awakening. I wrote one sentence across the top of the page. You don't need to be found, you just need to show up. I thought about that woman in the crowd. The way her voice cracked when she said, "You said what I couldn't." And suddenly, all those years I thought were wasted, every quiet breakdown, every lost job, every moment I sat alone thinking I had nothing left, they weren't the end. They were the beginning of my story. Within a month, I started volunteering at the local women's shelter, offering writing sessions on Saturday mornings. Nothing formal, just an open space where women could show up, sit in a circle, and write. At first, only 2 came, then 5, then 10. These weren't writers. Not in the traditional sense. They were single moms, former addicts, survivors of abuse, women who, like me, had been silenced by life. I didn't teach grammar or sentence structure. I asked questions like, what made you cry this week? What memory keeps showing up at 2 a.m.? What part of you are you tired of hiding? And they answered. Slowly. Then fiercely. There were tears. There were breakthroughs. There were nights I went home wrecked from the weight of their stories, but never hopeless. Because every story spoken out loud is one less story trapped in the dark. One afternoon, a woman named Marcy, mid-50s, sharp tongue, and always wore a flannel, read a letter she wrote to her 18-year-old self. When she finished, the room was silent. Then she looked around and said, I didn't know I still had something worth saying. I smiled. That's the thing. We all do, but no one ever tells us that loud enough. A few months later, the community center offered me a small grant to expand the workshop. I used it to buy new notebooks, print flyers, and rent a bigger room. We called it Unwritten. Because it wasn't about being perfect, it was about showing up before you think you're ready. And the women kept coming. Some shared. Some didn't. Some wrote angry. Some wrote tender. But all of them left lighter. Not because their pain disappeared, but because it was seen, held, respected. I looked at those rooms full of messy, radiant, healing stories, and I realized I hadn't just rebuilt my life. I had built something that let others rebuild too. And as for me, I still write. Every morning. I still walk to the park some evenings and sit on that same cracked bench. I still see Clara once a week. And every time she hugs me goodbye, she says, keep telling the truth. Darlin', the world needs it. Looking back, I used to think I had lost everything. But now, I see it differently. I lost everything I wasn't, so I could become everything I am. And if you're listening to this, feeling stuck, broken, forgotten, I want you to hear me. Your story's not over. Not even close. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to rewrite the narrative. You are allowed to be the hero of your own life. Because the truth is, healing doesn't come with applause or perfect timing. It comes quietly. When you finally decide to tell the truth, to sit in the silence, and to begin again. There's something sacred about watching someone realize they matter. I've seen it again and again. In the way a woman's hand trembles before she reads her first line aloud. In the way a room falls silent when a story hits too close to home. In the way laughter and tears mix when someone says, I didn't think anyone would understand. It's not about the writing. It's about being seen. Last spring, we organized something called the Wall of Light, a public art project where our workshop members posted anonymous lines from their writing, just one sentence, each on a giant wooden wall downtown. We painted the wall white and let them fill it with color. With truth, by the end of the week, hundreds of strangers had stopped to read. Some cried. Some left flowers. Some wrote their own lines on napkins and tucked them into the cracks. And right in the middle of it all, someone wrote, "I'm not broken. I'm just still becoming." No name. No signature. Just truth. I don't know who wrote that line. Maybe it was Marcy. Maybe it was Leah, the young mom who came to every session with her baby in a stroller. Maybe it was someone walking by who didn't know they needed to say it until they saw the wall. But I do know this. It stopped people in their tracks, including me. Because that one sentence, it summed up the entire journey. I spent so many years trying to be perfect, to hold it all together, to never show the cracks. But it's in those cracks that the light gets in. That's where we grow, where we transform. And I realized, maybe healing isn't about getting back to who you were. Maybe it's about becoming someone you've never had the chance to be. Today, the Unwritten Project is more than a writing group. It's a lifeline. We partner with shelters, halfway houses, Dane centers. We send journals to women in prison with prompts and letters of hope. I train other facilitators, people like me, who once thought they had nothing to offer, how to hold space for others with tenderness and courage. We don't have a fancy website. We don't have corporate sponsors. But we have each other. And every week, in cities and small towns, women gather in quiet rooms and say the hardest, bravest words of their lives, because when you tell your story, you don't just heal, you become a lighthouse for someone else lost at sea. That's the real miracle. Not that I survived, but that I found purpose in the wreckage, that I turned my silence into strength, that I became someone I would have needed when I was breaking. And if you're still listening, if you're standing on the edge of your own cliff, wondering if it's too late to change, let me be the one to say, it's not too late. It's never too late to choose truth, to choose softness, to choose a life that reflects your soul, not your scars. Your story is not a shame to hide. It is a light to carry. So go. Speak it. Write it. Live it. And watch what happens when the world finally sees you, not the mask. Not the version you were told to be, but the real, wild, beautifully unfinished you. Because you're not broken. You're just still becoming. I still walk by that bench sometimes. The one near the edge of 6th Street, where my life quietly collapsed in on itself all those years ago. The metal's rusted now. The wood chipped and worn. Most people pass it without a glance. But not me. Because that bench, that's where Luna ended and also where Luna began. It's strange how full circle life can be. These days, I get invited to speak at events. Me? The girl who once hid in motel rooms and counted ceiling stains to feel less alone. Now I stand before rooms filled with hundreds, sometimes thousands, and tell the truth I once thought would destroy me. Not because I have all the answers, but because I finally stopped pretending I did. At one recent event in Denver, after I spoke, a girl named Kayla approached me. She couldn't have been older than 20. She stood there clutching a spiral notebook so tight I thought it might tear in her hands. Her eyes were red, but her voice steady. I wrote something, she said. Because of you. She handed me her notebook. Inside was a poem raw, trembling, angry and soft all at once. It was messy. It was brave. It was hers. And it was beautiful. That night, as I sat in my hotel room, rereading Kayla's words, I realized something: the legacy we leave isn't made of grand speeches or viral moments. It's made of whispers. Of small, courageous choices. Of the way your truth makes space for someone else to tell theirs. This story, mine, was never just about me. It was about every person who's ever been told they're too much. Or not enough. It was about the woman waking up in a cold apartment, wondering if her life will ever feel like her own. It was about the teenage girl hiding her journal under her bed because no one ever told her her words matter. And it's about you, yes. You listening right now. You. With your fears and your doubts and your secret dreams you've never said out loud. Maybe you're standing in the middle of your own unraveling. Maybe you're still pretending you're okay. Maybe you're exhausted from holding everything together for everyone else. I want to tell you something no one told me back then. You are not weak for breaking. You are human. And the moment you choose to stop hiding just one moment of truth, that's when the light starts to pour in. That's when the story changes. So, if this journey has taught me anything, it's this: pain is not the end. Silence is not safety. And shame is a liar. Your voice matters. Your healing matters. And the world is desperate, not for more perfection, but for more people brave enough to be real. Today, I don't strive to be impressive. I strive to be whole. To live from my soul. Not from fear. To keep building spaces where stories can rise. Even from the ruins. And when I feel lost, when I question if any of it matters, I go back to the beginning. That broken bench. That forgotten motel. That version of me who didn't know she'd ever make it. I whisper to her, "Thank you." Because she didn't give up. And now, neither will I. So wherever you are in your journey, starting, sinking, or rising, please remember this: you are not alone. And your story, no matter how messy, might just be someone else's miracle. It's easy to look at the end of a story and forget how far someone's come. People see me now calm, confident, steady, and they assume I've always been this way. But I carry every version of Luna with me. The one who broke down in that motel? The one who doubted her worth? The one who stared at ceilings and questioned if life would ever mean something? Those women still live inside me. And they are the reason I stand today. Because healing, it doesn't happen all at once. It comes in pieces. In relapses and realizations. In late-night journal entries and quiet sunrises that remind you the world keeps turning. Even when you feel stuck. For me, the real transformation wasn't when I got my first invitation to speak. It wasn't when I signed the lease on my new studio or when my poetry was published in a small Brooklyn magazine. It was the morning I looked in the mirror and said, out loud, "I forgive you." Not to someone else, but to myself. I forgave the younger Luna for staying silent too long. For people-pleasing her way into emptiness. For numbing. For hiding. For surviving. Because surviving is not a failure. It's proof that you're still here. And if you're still here, still breathing, still searching, then you still have time to become who you were always meant to be. I didn't find my purpose in success. I found it in surrender. Surrendering the idea that I had to have it all figured out. Surrendering the shame that told me I wasn't enough. Surrendering the fear that my voice didn't matter. What came next was clarity. And with clarity came connection. People started writing me letters. Not because I had all the answers, but because I spoke the truth. Even when my voice trembled. That's what people really need. Not another perfect picture, but an honest one. So, here's mine. I am Luna. I have failed. I have risen. I have broken. I have rebuilt. And every scar I carry is a sentence in the story I now tell without shame. If you're listening to this and feel something stirring inside you, a whisper, a pull, a quiet voice saying, maybe me too, then let this be your sign. Not to be fearless, but to be honest, because your story matters. Your healing matters. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there is waiting for your truth to set them free. This is not the end. This is the beginning of you.